Hi everyone. Now I'm going to explain the function of the speech sounds as the book of phonetics by Finch. Well, my name is Nati Kolkem, so let's go and start. Well, as an introduction, uh, we review the influence of the speech sounds from other language, and as we can see, it could have some variations that define the the speech sounds. For example, according to the years, it can be many variations as the sound or the pronunciation of a word, of a letter, or a phoneme. We can find, for example, the pronunciation of M or N. It can have some deals with it. Uh, well, uh, Also we saw and we review the sounds can be classified as the sound. For example, the fricative, the vibrative like the or the nasals that are the and like this. There are many groups that are where we can find the sound classify classification. Well, then also we saw that it can be some overlapping distribution that it can occur during the set of the phonetic environments in which the sounds occur are partially or completely identical. For example, when we talk about the letter M and N, uh, they can sound too similar, especially when they are when we can find it in a sentence. We can confuse them. Another example also there is the letter P with B, like the bat, pat, bat. We can find some similarities there. Well, as a next, also we can find the classification of the sounds like allophones and phonemes. The allophones are the linguistically non-significant variants of each phoneme. In other words, a phoneme may be realized by more than one speech sound, and the selection of each variant is usually conditioned by the phonetic environment of the phoneme. For example, um, they can we can find it in free variation. On the other hand, a phoneme is a set of allophones or individual non-contrastive speech segments. The allophones are the sounds, uh, while the phoneme is a set of such sounds. For example, an allophone can be the letter S, for example. But the phoneme can be the set of these. For example, uh, we can say, I don't know, sound in the letter sound. This by itself can work as an allophone, but all of these are phonemes because they are the sets of an allophone. Well, let's continue. Uh, for a single phoneme, there may be a number of different sounds that can be made. These sounds become clear when we place a piece of paper in front of our mouths and we see the reaction when we make different sounds with the same phoneme. Thus, the different sounds made with the same phoneme are called allophones. As we said before, the allophone is just the letter, just the single one, but the phoneme are the set of these allophones. The allophones are a kind of phoneme that changes its sound based on how a word is spelled. For example, we say the word bat, bat, as we said before. I'm going to write it. Here we have bat, and here we have bat. Here we can find the variation of the allophones. Vat, we don't use the H. Pat, we can find the sound of the H. Or we can we saw here, we can find the difference between allophones and phonemes. Well, the phonemes are the linguistic contrastive or significant sound. As we said, there are the set of the sounds. There are minimal pairs, which vary only by the identity of the segment. Um, for example, when we say meat and cat, they are also similar, but we can find there some variation. Then, the smallest units of the sound can be used in many different words that are the allophones. For example, when we talk about the letter P, we can find it in different words, but it can vary in the pronunciation of this phoneme. For example, pot, spot, speed, face. Face. In this case, for example, the letter P sounds like an F. And pot, it sounds more louder, like from spot, spot. Then we can define a phoneme as the smallest class of sounds that it is in a specific language. For example, in English, we can find the letter L and R. There are two phonemes because they replace one with the other produce sound. For example, uh, we can we can change this allophone for the letter L, and it can vary in the meaning. For example, royal, loyal. They sound similar, but when we change the allophone R for the allophone L, it can vary in their meaning. By contrast, the L and R don't affect the meaning in language such as Japanese, for example, another language, Japanese and Thai, and another instance from the phonemes. We also I find some differences between the allophone and a phoneme. The phonemes are basic units of sound. They are significant, but they are not predictable. And in different position, in different words, the phoneme have different sounds, like we saw before, right? Loyal, royal. This is when allophones are called that are not meaningful and predictable. There are many distinction between a phoneme and an allophone. Lies in what it is in your mind and what comes out of your mouth. As we compare the word pat or bat, we said pat or bat. This is meaningful, and if we change the pronunciation, so it can have some variation. Well, the phonemes are placed between slashes, like as we said before, and the allophone in square brackets. An allophone can be, for example, this letter, um, and we can find it here. But a phoneme, we can find a rat, for example, rat. When we divided these words, we need to put it like this, right, between two slashes. Well, then an allophone is the realization of a phoneme, and the phonemes can occur in the same phonetic position, but the allophone not. The allophones can be in relationship of a complementary distribution. The allophones of the same phoneme don't occur in the same position. Well, let's continue. And now we are going to define the phonetics and the phonology. As we said before, um, the sound, the speech of the sound, have some theory because because it is divided into different groups, but the subject that realize this and establish this are the phonetics and the phonology. The phonetic is about the physical aspect of the sound. It studies the production and the perception of the sound, the called phones, as we said before, the the M, the A, and like this. And the phonetics has some subcategories, but it is not specified. We usually mean articulatory phonetics, that is the study of the production of the speech sounds by the articulatory and vocal tract by the speaker. The phonetic transcription are done using the square bracket, like I showed you before. Well, now, the phonology is about the abstract aspect of the sound, and it studies the phonemes. For example, as we divided the word rat, and it is when we try to explain in which category belongs each phoneme, we divided it into slashes, in these slashes. Rat, R, A, T, but the A is going to be different. Well, the phonology is about establishing what are the phonemes in a given language, those sounds that can bring a difference in meaning between two words. A phoneme is a phonic segment with a meaning value, for example, in minimal pairs, hat, hat. This, here we can find the differences, the letter D and the letter T. Let's continue. Well, uh, now here we can find the differences between the phonology and the phonetic. When we talk about a phonological level, the allophones, as we said before, we divided these in the square brackets, but and this is the allophones. And when we talk about a phonological level, we put this into slashes. For example, a phoneme L can have variations. It can change in the manner of the pronunciation. We can say, for example, in N, we can find N, two variations in N. We can find four variations in phoneme L, four allophone variations. In the letter N, we can find two variations. This is those are the allophones. The allophones we studied in the phonetic level, and when we try to analyze the phonemes, we use it the phonological level. Well, now we find a complementary distribution and a free variation in this study. The complementary distribution is a mutually exclusive relationship between two phonetically similar segments, and it exists when one segment occurs in an environment where the other segment never occurs. For example, um, the aspirated P. For example, in the word spot, when we said pot, spot. In this case, in this word, spot, the P is going to be aspirated, spot. But in this case, pot, we pronounce the letter P. Well, the free variation is the interchangeable relationship between two phones, in which the phones may substitute for one another in the same environment without causing a change in the meaning. For example, when we talk about this word, I'm going to write it here to see in which word we are talking about. Data. It can have some variations according to the pronunciation of the speaker, but it can't vary in the meaning of this word. We can pronounce like this: data, data, or data, data, data. But it can change the meaning because it is a defined word. It is established word: data, data. Some we can find also some of these free variation from the words that we that are from French, from German, because they are established, as we said before. For example, the word root, we can pronounce like and like the English version, like the British version, root, road, sorry, road. But in the French version, it is root, and it can vary. It can have some variation because of the pronunciation. Well, let's continue. Um, Talking about this variation, we find the received pronunciation. Uh, there are some differences between the accents of the language, but it can vary according to the speaker's region from the speaker come from. For example, when we talk about the English version from United Kingdom, British version, from American version or Canadian version or Australian version. This is a received pronunciation. Um, this is an accent. It is not a dialect because there are some differences from dialect and accent. The accent is simple. Uh, the how we pronounce um, a word like before. I show you the word root, but it can be pronounced like root or road. Um, it doesn't avoid a non-standard grammatical construction and the localized vocabulary characteristics of the regional dialect. It is non-specific. It is according to the speaker's geographic background, and it doesn't have a relationship between a dialect, I said before. Well, now as finally I'm going to explain that there are some differences between the phonemes from the English and Spanish. As we can see here, the English vowel phonemes are 20, but in instance, the the vowels in Spanish are just 5, without taking into account the diphthongs. With diphthongation, we can find over 18 vowels. Then we can find some differences between the consonants in English and version and Spanish version. We can find similarities like here with the P and the B, but in the Spanish version, in the English version, we can find M, M, and in here, for example, we couldn't find some similarities in fricatives from English to Spanish version. For example, the labiodental V, that in English is V, but in the Spanish version we couldn't find it. And then the X, like it too different from the Spanish version. Well, that's all. Thank you so much. The bibliography that I used, it was the book from the Finch, Diana Finch, a course in English phonetics. Well, thank you so much.